Hello, and thank you for joining us on Classic Vinyl Podcast. This is the podcast where we listen to and review albums and songs from the classic vinyl era, the 60s and 70s. And this, of course, is our Meet the Beatles series. We're on to their fourth studio album, Beatles For Sale. And this is side 2 we're doing today. I'm your host, Justin. I'm joined by my co-host, Tyler.
And I am present.
Once again,
I am present, yeah.
You ready to get to side 2 of this thing?
Yeah, let's flip this disc and play the side 2.
Side 2.
Okay, so side 2 opens up with probably arguably the most popular song on this album, 8 Days a Week. Now, this is a Lennon and McCartney composition. Lead vocals on this one by Lennon. Once again, double tracked. Released as a single with I Don't Want to Spoil the Party as the B-side on February 15th, 1965, here in the U.S. So this song was on the Beatles' U.S. album, Beatles 6. The single reached number 1 in both the U.S. and in Canada. So this is the only single off of this actual album. The other singles, I Feel Fine and She's a Woman, were released separate from the album like they like to do, especially early on. The single is certified gold in the USA by the RIAA. So originally this song was written for the film Help, when the title of the film was supposedly going to be called 8 Arms to Hold You, which is kind of an interesting name for the film.
Mm-hmm.
And possibly, if you've heard of Ringoisms, there was a lot of Ringoisms used for the Beatles. Tomorrow Never Knows, obviously 8 days a week. There's others, but McCartney has stated a couple different sources for the titles over the years. Like I was talking about in the earlier episode, is when they get interviewed after all these years, they come up with different reasons for it. To me, that's understandable because I can't remember what I did a year ago, let alone thinking back 50, 60 years. So
yeah, all I know is Paul McCartney says, no, actually, they're just really good friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is the first song, or at very least the first popular song to feature a fade-in intro, which is kind of unique. Alternate version of this song is found on Anthology 1. And one thing about 8 Days a Week is all the Beatles, and when I say all the Beatles, I guess I'm meaning just Lennon and McCartney, have stated they didn't care much for this song, and they never did play it live, funny enough. So what did you think of 8 Days a Week?
I think it's really interesting to hear that they didn't care much for this song. They still used it as a way to do things like that fade in, which I can just sit there and listen to hear the Beatles in the studio writing this down, and they're like, we do fade outs. Why don't we try a fade in, sort of thing. Oh, I can totally see them doing that because they love to play around with stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was saying on last week's episode, that this is a album where they really kind of come into their own in the studio and started experimenting with things, mainly because they were used to it. Mm-hmm. They weren't so naive to it, but I also think because of their popularity and their ego starting to take over. So I think things like that is what actually propelled their music forward.
Yeah, what I'm seeing here is that you're getting a different kind of love sung about than the typical puppy love that brought in Beatlemania. And so instead of the girls, going crazy over this sort of thing, it's more like, well, there's other kinds of love out there as well, and they're not always equally matched.
I think Paul McCartney's still on the same plane. I think on this, as we stated before, I think you're mostly seeing that from Lennon, the introspective lyrics, and like he stated, him entering his Bob Dylan period. Not so much as what you see once you get into Rubber Soul and Revolver, but you start seeing little hints of it here.
Yeah, for sure. And way to go, Bob Dylan, for introducing John Lennon to the marijuana and messing him up.
Or completing him, depending on how you look at it.
Really could be. This is a different kind of John Lennon, and it's really cool. But this song particularly, 8 Days a Week, it's very popular Beatles song. It's all over the radios and soft rock. And it's a fine song. This is probably a lot like your more previous typical Beatles puppy love songs, but there's a different element to it where he's sitting there singing about how intensely he cares for this girl, that it's going to take 8 days a week for him to adequately express the intensity of his love for her. This is kind of the way that I express my love for my wife, is that, if she had any idea how deeply I feel for her, then she would understand that there's just not enough hours in the day. I need 27 hours in every day and 8 days in every week in order to accurately describe how I feel.
I feel like you're being such a suck up.
I am being such a suck up, but that's how I feel about my wife. And she's like, well, yeah, I don't know. She puts up with me. Sometimes she wishes she could hire a babysitter. 8 days a week, really intense love and real sweet puppy kind of love. But it's a different kind of love than the Beatles have sung about on previous albums. And I like it, but I'm with the Beatles on this. This is not necessarily way up there with. What are your thoughts?
I like 8 days a week, but if anything, out of any song on this album, it suffers overplay for me. I've just heard it so many times. You know, it is one of the first Beatles songs I learned to play on guitar. It's got some pretty simple chords to it. I think the one thing that stands out in this song more than anything is the hand clapping. It's kind of the lead instrument in this song, and it's got good little guitar licks in the background from George Harrison during the verses. It's got more good harmonies, like his, I should say, a continued theme on this album, but a continued theme with this band, especially the early band, but a good way to start side two. So that brings us to the second song on side two, Words of Love. This is another cover on here from another artist the Beatles really had a fondness for, Buddy Holly. Buddy Holly recorded and released this song in 1957. You've got the lead vocal duties on this shared by both Lennon and McCartney. This song was also on the U.S. Beatles album Beatles 6. This is another song the band was very familiar with playing live. They played this live quite a bit. They recorded this song in just 2 takes. There is an alternate live version of this on Live at the BBC Volume 2. What did you think of Words of Love?
You know, this one sounds a little, I want to say that this song sounds a little Roy Orbison. It sounds like it's sung by him. Buddy Holly, sure, it sounds a little Buddy Holly-ish.
Well, that's because Buddy Holly wrote it and sang it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, just thought I'd throw that in there.
I'm glad that you did. Yeah, this is one that it's album filler for me. And they didn't really take it and make it their own the way that I would have hoped that they would have. And I don't even know what I would have hoped that they would have or what that would have sounded like. Because they are the Beatles. They're doing it. They're doing their thing, even if it's a Buddy Holly song. They've done it with other songs. I just didn't really feel like they took it the way that they took some of the other ones, like the Little Richard songs or the Chuck Berry songs. But still, it's a sweet, dreamy little love song, and it's perfectly fine. I don't have anything to criticize about it. What are your thoughts?
I like this song, but I think, you know, with it not being like an upbeat R&B song and stuff, it is what it is. You know, it's a sweet, slow song. It's got some decent guitar work in it from Harrison. That's the one thing that shines on this. It's got those harmony vocals in this, but what's different is they're kind of in a lower register on this. They sing in a, Paul and John sing in a really low register, which is kind of decent. It's got a good bass line in it. I think if you listen to this song, the guitar is the strongest point of this one. But I don't know if I'd throw it down to album filler, but it is album filler. Let's be honest. All these covers on this were album filler for them to get an album out, right? And but they're the Beatles too. So for me, it shines above what other people's album filler is.
Yeah, we've certainly reviewed some other albums on this podcast, and as far as album filler goes, I mean, this is still better than a lot of the other albums that we've listened to.
Yeah, so that brings us on to the next song, which is another cover. This is another artist that had a fondness for too, Carl Perkins. And this song is Honey Don't. He recorded and released this in 1956 as the B-side to his popular song Blue Suede Shoes. Lead vocal on this one is the first and only appearance on this album by their drummer, Ringo Starr, and although it was originally sang by John Lennon in their live set, probably before Ringo joined the band, I would guess, but I'm not sure. Now, Ringo receives the longest song on the album. This is a really long song, clocking in at 2 minutes and 57 seconds. So pretty crazy, because this is a pretty short album.
It really is.
So this song was recorded in 5 takes. There is a live version of this on Live at the BBC 2. What did you think of Honey Don't?
You know, this is one of those songs where you've got Ringo Starr. He's got really good vocals. He's got a good voice. He doesn't sound like the other Beatles. He sounds like Ringo. He does a good job at this, singing about a girl that just keeps making promises and then breaking them. It's got a really good sound to this song. In the song, he's ardently protesting this girl's disintegritous behavior. Like
Yeah,
she's
been out painting the town.
she has, like, he's bringing her home on Saturday night to drop her off from the date, just to find out that she's going back out after he's dropped her off with other guys. And she's like set up dates on Saturday night for after he brings her home and drops her off. Like, this she is painting the town, and not with him. It's breaking his heart. And that's what the whole Honey Don't is about, is he's feeling really messed with. And so he's protesting, and I don't blame him. Really good guitar work, really good drums. Ringo's doing a good job. So what are your thoughts about Honey Don't?
I wouldn't say Ringo has the best vocal. According to me, it's just Ringo's vocal. And it kind of fits the funnier songs, and you see that throughout the Beatles' career. I'm not a huge Ringo solo fan, but I like what they piece him in here and there. I think it's got a good guitar walk down to start, and you said it, is the guitar's best thing in this whole song. You've got some maracas in here. It's got minimal bass, but it's good. It's got a couple little guitar solos from George Harrison in this. In fact, Ringo asks him once to rock on for him once, and he does, and then he asks him to rock on once more, and he does. So John playing his acoustic J160E in here. I think this feels to me a little more like album filler. It's got good guitar work, but it's just like, we got to get Ringo a vocal on the album, and I don't skip the song, but I wouldn't put it in my top either. So that moves us to the next song, Every Little Thing. Now, this is an original written by Lennon and McCartney, but this one's primarily a Paul McCartney song. Lead vocal is shared by Lennon and McCartney. You got Lennon in the verses, and then in the chorus, you've got harmonies, like a lot of the other songs. This song was on the Beatles' U.S. album, Beatles 6, as well. Now, Paul claims he wrote this song while on the 1964 U.S. tour as possibly going to be their next single, but for some reason it didn't work out and it never was released as their next single. I can kind of see where he's getting with that, because it kind of seems like it was written as a hooky little single to me, but he also claims this is a love song written for his then girlfriend, Jane Asher. This was recorded in 6 takes. What are your thoughts on Every Little Thing?
I also can see this like being single material, but it's just not quite there. It is missing something that would push it up onto single status. And so I think they were right to just leave it on the album.
Yeah, but we're talking 1964 too. When you listen to a lot of the singles that were released, every bit as good as a lot of those that were hitting radio, and even a lot of them that hit number one. And I'm pretty sure at this time, if the Beatles would have released this, it would have hit number one. Everything else they did.
Yeah, everything else did, so why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is, so for all the other kind of weird loves that have been sung about on this album so far, this one goes in the opposite direction, into a love that is equally matched. This guy is with a really gorgeous girl. She's a real head turner. Everywhere she goes, people are, getting into car crashes and stuff because she's just so gorgeous. But every little thing that she does for him. And so she loves him just as much right back as he loves her. That's really beautiful. And I like this song. It's really well put together. I really like the passion behind it and the feeling behind it. This guy, he knows that he's lucky in love to be with this girl, but it's more just like he's lucky to have found that someone that loves him right back with as much love that he has for her in return. 6 takes. They took some practice on this in the studio, and they did a really good job. I think it's a really good song. Certainly fits the album nicely. What are your thoughts, Justin?
It's funny that you think 6 takes is them taking some practice. I mean, you get into the later songs where they're doing hundreds of takes, but
yeah,
I think, it's a sweet little love song. I mean, it's a good song. It does kind of fit in the category of album filler. It's got a good bass line, which I think is one of the better things. Good harmonies, once again, like throughout this album. A good song. Not a skipper for me, just a good one to listen to. And what's cool about most of these songs is even if you don't like them, they're not going to last more than 2 minutes on here.
For sure.
Yeah, they're just short little songs. So it moves us on to the next song, I Don't Want to Spoil the Party, written by Lennon and McCartney. So we got another original on here. Lead vocal by Lennon, once again doubled. You got McCartney on harmonies on this one. This one was also on the Beatles' US album, Beatles 6. Paul stated they wrote this song for Ringo, but something happened. I don't know if they decided he was better for Honey Don't or what, but I Don't Want to Spoil the Party. It kind of sounds like it's a fun little Ringo song, right? It would have been interesting to hear him sing this one, but and this was written kind of as a country style song originally, and so Ringo, out of all the Beatles, was into country more than any of them. In fact, he still is. He just released a country album, but that could possibly make that point being true, that this was intended for Ringo, but it just didn't work that way. Now, this one took quite a few takes, considering what they'd been doing on this album this far. They recorded this in 19 takes, the last take being the version you hear on this album. What do you think about I Don't Want to Spoil the Party?
So listening to this song, I'm kind of picturing Ringo at a party, like going around. He doesn't want to spoil the party, but he's just not feeling the vibe because he's pining for this girl that's not there. He's in love with a girl that's not at this party. And so he doesn't want to bring everybody down because he's missing her, but he's so fixated on her that he can't even have a good time without her. Can't have a good time with his friends. And so all he wants to do is go out and look for her, go walk up and down the streets and see if he happens to find her somewhere. And it's kind of funny because Ringo strikes me as being that kind of guy. Like when I see him interacting with the other Beatles, he's just this sweet little guy that's so polite and, would never rock the boat. He's heartbroken, so he wants to go find this girl that he's fixated on. And I don't know. It didn't matter that he wasn't singing it. I still picture this song being about Ringo, because when you say like they wrote it for him, I kind of think, oh, they wrote it for him. Maybe they wrote it about him. It fits. I had a good time listening to it. One of my favorites because it's just it's such a sweet little kind of love that this song's about compared to all the other ones, and I don't feel like it's as creepy stalkerish as some other songs, but this one is he really likes this girl and he's not going to be much good company until he finds her. What are your thoughts about this one?
I knew one of my least favorite songs would be your favorites just because it's strange, but it's got a good guitar intro, good guitar throughout. I like the breakdown the most in this song where though tonight she's made me sad. That's my favorite part of this song. Mm-hmm. I just really like the lyric in that. It's got good bass throughout, and it's got a decent little guitar solo in it. But to me, it's one of the two songs on this album that comes close to being a skipper for me. But it's a decent song. I don't skip it. There are a few Beatles songs I will skip, and funny enough, some of them are the more popular ones, but that's just because I hear them too much. But let's get on to the next song, What You're Doing. This is another original composition by Lennon and McCartney, but mainly a Paul McCartney composition. You've got a doubled vocal by Paul McCartney on this one. This one is also on the US Beatles album, Beatles 6. A small portion of this is also found on the Love Cirque du Soleil album. It's kind of a really cool album if you haven't heard it, with all the mashups and mix-ups and stuff. I've been to the Beatles Love Cirque show multiple times, and it's a shame it closed. But that is a good album, and it's mixed up with Drive My Car and The Word, so it's kind of interesting if you want to hear that. The song was inspired by Paul McCartney's sometimes stormy relationship with his then-girlfriend that he had a previous song about, Jane Asher. It's another song Paul wrote while touring the U.S. This song was recorded in 19 takes. What are your thoughts about What You're Doing?
Oh, this one's a heartbreaker. What she's doing is breaking his heart. I mean, it's really driving him away. She's got these quirks, these little vices, or her personality flaws. He loves her, and his love is true, but all of this bad behavior, it's hurting him, and she better stop it if she wants to keep him, because it is going to drive him away.
Could be the opposite, though.
Could be.
Maybe he's driving her away.
He's driving her away.
Who knows?
Yeah, because of all of his bad behavior.
Yeah, well, he's on tour and he's in the middle of Beatlemania, so who knows?
Yeah, so, I mean, Miss Asher probably isn't at fault.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Pretty decent song. It's got really nice instrumentals, and I'll let you go on about that because I'm more of a lyric kind of guy.
Well, the one thing that's interesting about this song is it's got a drum intro.
It does.
Which is pretty decent, and it's different. It's got a good vocal from Paul McCartney. That's probably the thing that stands out the best on this. It's got decent little guitar licks. It's, to me, kind of like the last song, not great, not horrible, just a good song that they threw down. So that moves us to the last song on the album, which they end up with a cover with one of their favorite artists. I should really say with Carl Perkins. George Harrison is the one that really had the affinity to Carl Perkins, and I'll kind of explain that. But this is a song, Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, recorded and released by Carl Perkins in 1957. Now, this is actually the third Carl Perkins song the Beatles recorded. Of course, Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, Honey Don't, which is on this album, and Matchbox, which was sang by Ringo. Now, the lead vocal on this one is the first on this album by George Harrison and the last on this album by George Harrison, so the only. He was by far the largest Carl Perkins fan. He even took the stage name Carl Harrison early on in the Beatles when they were kind of playing with stage names. But this is another song the band played quite frequently live, which led to the song on the album being recorded in one take only. So this is what you hear, is them playing this live. There is an alternate version of this found on Anthology 2, along with some live versions on Live at the BBC and Live at the Hollywood Bowl that are pretty decent. So what are your thoughts on the last song on this album, Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby?
Great song, classic rock and roll rhythm to it, and it's just smooth and nice rock and roll. And George singing about how he's just bombarded with all these girls trying to hook up with him. And I have to say, George, that'll happen when you're one of the Beatles.
Yeah.
Fame will do that to a fella.
But he'd been singing it for quite a while, so I'm sure he started singing it before he had fame.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So maybe he was just ambitious, huh?
Yeah, it could have been.
I can see that Carl Perkins inspiration in George, and it's nice. It's kind of cool to see somebody try to emulate one of their heroes in much the way that you see Paul McCartney emulating Little Richard earlier in the album. So it's kind of cool to see George doing the same thing with Carl Perkins. Excellent instruments. This is one of my favorites on the album. What's your thoughts on this one, Justin?
I thought it was a good way to end the album. When they do their covers, I like when they're little rockier little numbers, R&B numbers, and this is it. I like a Harrison vocal. I mean, it's good. It would have been nice if we had a couple, but at the time he goes, we're running this thing, right? That's what made the Beatles as well, so it's hard to argue with it. But this has a vocal start, which is a pretty good vocal on this thing. He's got a good vocal. The only thing I can say is it was recorded kind of echoey on the vocal, and I don't know if I like that. So when you hear the live versions, it's a little more powerful to me than this. But a good way to end the album, and I'm glad George Harrison got his song in. So do you want to get to winners and losers?
Yeah, let's do them.
Winners and losers.
Okay, Ty, so we listened to Beatles For Sale, side 1 and side 2. What would you pick as your 2 or 3 least favorite songs?
Number 3 in ascending order is 8 Days a Week. Least favorite just because of overplay. No Reply would be my number 2 least favorite. That one, it's just not the kind of love song that I'm feeling. I didn't really like it. Also, Babies in Black was one of my least favorite, and that one, it just didn't really grab me like this whole he's chasing her who's chasing him. That being said, not a one of those is a bad song. They're just my least favorites on this album. What are your 3 least favorites, or 2 or 3?
We're way off on this. So my least 2 favorite songs, which doesn't mean I don't like them, but I would say What You're Doing and Mr. Moonlight are 2 songs that I probably like the least. But like I've said earlier, they're not skippers for me. So still good songs. It's a pretty strong album. It's just a hard one for me to rate. So what are your favorite 2 or 3 songs on this one?
I'm going to start with Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby. That one was a really fun song, and I thought that was well done. Excellent way to close out the album. I Don't Want to Spoil the Party is one of my favorites, and I just love that Ringo Starr, because it's so about his kind of personality. Just a polite little guy that doesn't want to cause any problems, but he's going to leave the party because he doesn't really see the girl that he's wanting to be with. And also, I'm going to put on with my favorites rock and roll music. It's not written by the Beatles, but excellently performed, well covered. Those are my three favorites. What are your favorites, Justin?
Here's where we differ greatly. My three favorites are the first three songs to start the album. No Reply, I'm a Loser, and Babies in Black. When we get to the album rating, I'll kind of explain it, but I think the first side of this album is twice as strong as the second side. And I like hearing the covers, and I'm glad they did them, but this album was thrown together quick, and so it shows what an amazing group they are. So do you want to get to the album rating?
Yeah, let's rate it.
Album rating.
Okay, listener, if this is your first episode, I will briefly explain our rating system. It's a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the best and 5 being smack dab in the middle. So I rate this one, it's good, but it's not that good. I put this one at a 7. Where do you put this one, Justin?
So this album's really hard for me to rate. I would say overall, I've probably always, when I sit down, I consider this my least favorite Beatles album. But then when I sit down and listen to it, I'm not so sure because it's got 4 or 5 of songs I really, really enjoy and some covers I really enjoy. I don't know. I think for me, I rate this album an 8 on a Beatles scale. I would probably rate the first side a 9 or 9.5, and I'd probably rate the second side a 7.
Okay.
So I'm going to settle at an 8 on a Beatles sliding scale. I can't really say... I know I just got done saying it's been my least favorite Beatles album, but I don't even know if that's true because every day changes. You know, I may be in a White Album mood. I may be for Abbey Road, or maybe I just want to listen to Please Please Me because I'm into the early Beatles at a time. And I mean, I'm sure there's some people that are only into their late stuff or only into the middle or only into the early, but I have those modes all the time. So a very strong album for me. It shouldn't be missing from the catalog. There's nothing I would throw away. There's nothing I would skip on it. I'm just rating it on a sliding scale. So that's Beatles for Sale, and we'll be with you again not too long with another Meet the Beatles episode, but check us out next week for our next episode, and send us an email at classicvinylpodcast@gmail.com with any comments, questions, or concerns, or songs or albums you'd like us to rate. And it's probably getting old, but I really want you to know we appreciate everybody that takes the time to email us their suggestions, songs they want us to rate, even the criticism. We enjoy that as well. But until next time, we'll see you later.
See ya. Thank you so much for listening to Classic Vinyl Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Classic Vinyl Podcast for updates, and also share us with your music-loving friends.